Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stress-Free IEP, the show where we help families build their village to raise their neurodivergent children with confidence and support. I'm your host, Frances Schefter, special education attorney, advocate, and fellow parent, walking this journey with you. Each week, we shine a light on professionals, resources, and real world strategies that can empower you to navigate the IEP process and beyond. Whether you're tuning in live on Facebook or YouTube or listening later on your favorite podcast app, we're so glad you're here. Please feel free to ask any questions live or in the comment section. We promise to respond. Let's dive in and meet today's amazing guest. Lisa Riegel is the author of NeuroWell, a book that helps schools align brain science and practice so students and staff are happier, healthier, and more successful. She is also the author of the 8C Commitment Framework, which is a leadership book that helps school leaders engage staff in transformational shifts necessary for educational success for all students. Lisa has varied educational experiences and has taught in the K-12, collegiate, college level, and graduate level. She consulted with the Ohio Department of Education to write a procedural safeguards manual that is organized to inform and engage parents. She currently consults with schools that are looking for more effective ways to increase staff and student engagement, decrease discipline and absenteeism, and improve opportunities for all students, but specifically the at-risk students. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. I love it that aligning the brain science and practice, right? Because that's what's needed for all of us.
Yep.
And so what does that look like?
So I think that the first part is understanding, and I can speak to this through the lens of special education. I first became aware that people really did not have an understanding of this at all when my son was in fifth grade. He's 20 now, but in fifth grade, we went through an evaluation process. He's twice exceptional, so he's incredibly smart, but he has really bad ADD, which is a disaster for a kid in fifth grade. So when we went to the IEP meeting, I was like, so what does this data in the evaluation report mean? Like, what did he have to do that he couldn't do? What are these skills? What do they look like? And no one could answer me. And I'm like, okay, so we are solving a problem we can't identify with a bunch of drop-down menu solutions. And this is supposed to help my kid. And I'm like, and his issue really wasn't academic. It was more emotional and executive function type, making sure he got focused to do the academics. He was a fine student. So I was like, so how is another half hour of math going to change the world here? Like, we need to be doing executive function development. So that started really getting me thinking about, behavior happens in the brain. And what I talk about is that any behavior, academic or social behavior, is the intersection between our biology and our context. And when we understand the biology, then we can reframe the problem. We can sometimes develop some empathy for people who are struggling, and we can create a solution that's actually aligned. And then the context in schools, we ultimately have total control over that. We can create a positive, safe, supportive context for all of our students. And so that kind of started me down this path. And then I started really getting into looking at the brain science behind motivation and engagement. My doctoral work was in leadership, but I focused more on like the human systems versus the policies. And I just have been interested always in like, why can't we just be happy? What is going on here it just seems like people are so stuck in so many ways. So I really focused on the people side. And then I was like, okay, this is like social science, which is really interesting. But is there a link where the brain science explains the social science? And so I started really digging into that. And it led me to, a lot of schools call me in to work with their at-risk kids because I love them. And a lot of those kids are neurodivergent or have IEPs. And what I looked at was like even the behavior plans that they do. I'm like, the behavior plans are the antithesis of how our brain changes a habit. It doesn't make any sense. And then it doesn't work. And then we continue to send messages to the child that you're a failure or you're a bad kid or you're whatever. And then that impacts our brain function for perception. So it all becomes this cycle of a mess for the kid.
Yeah. And the teachers, because they're like, right? Because, well, we're doing everything you told us to do and nothing's working, right?
And then they blame the kid because they did what they were told to do. There must be something wrong with this child. And the reality
Right.
is there's something wrong with your solution. But
Correct.
educators, they don't know better. They're not trained in this, and it's a real travesty. I think that any educator program, any leadership program, I taught in the graduate program at Ohio State for principal licensure. And it was very heavy org theory, instructional supervision tactics, but there wasn't anything about people. Like, how do you move the people to do what you need to do? So the 8C commitment framework that I wrote the book title is actually called Aspirations to Operations. And it details this framework that I've developed that helps principals understand the human system within their staff so that they can align their implementation practices and support practices in a way that will help change stick.
And it makes so much sense because when you look out at the business world, managers are taught how to manage, how to interact with people, how to guide people. Principals aren't taught any of that.
No. And just because you're a good teacher who relates well to children doesn't mean you're a good principal who relates well to adults.
Correct. And how to manage. And I say all the time, the principals, I usually say make or break, but the principals' abilities and knowledge and thoughts about special education impact the school completely. And you can see in the special ed department where principals are micromanaging or they have no concept of special education or they're very disciplinary and don't get that this isn't a child making a choice to do this. This is the brain function.
Right. And that's one of the things that I really try to teach educators is how the brain perceives reality. So like our brain, 80% of the traffic in our brain is below our nose. And that is the unconscious animal brain that is literally there to keep us alive. And so 80% of the traffic is there. Our morals, character, personality, information processing is all up here in the front. And when we perceive our environment, what happens is every single thing that happens to us, we create kind of like a filter. So I always use the example of like a spaghetti strainer. If you have a banana and you run it through a strainer, it doesn't look like a banana anymore. It's still a banana, but the reality and the perception of reality look different. And when we have all these life experiences that create these folders, all the way from when we're in the womb, and is the world safe and dangerous, or safe and supportive? Is it chaotic and dangerous? Are people generally kind? Are people generally mean? I share a story often. My parents were divorced and I sat on my stoop waiting for my dad to pick me up a lot. And he was a serial late person. So I spent a lot of time waiting. And so my brain made an association between lateness and feeling bad and feeling like, worth or love or those kinds of things. It attached those two. Not logical necessarily, but that's what it did. And so that filter is stored in there. So when I'm running late, I don't say in my brain, I'm running late, so I think I'm going to go ahead and get nervous now. It just happens all unconsciously down here. And I think when we see kids, I worked with an at-risk school that's kind of a separate facility school. And I said to the principal, when we start to look at our context, I walk through the door and it quacks like a duck and looks like a duck. It just, it is a duck. So when a kid walks in here, it's a school and they have all these negative filters from school. So we have to really work hard to make this context different. So how are we going to make it not feel like all the things that their brain is associating? But, I see in classrooms with kids, I'm like, the teacher's getting all angry with the child and the teacher's dysregulating and it's escalating the situation. And so I always tell teachers what is happening right now has very little to do with the actual what of the moment. It has everything to do with the whole combination of past and how that child's brain has associated things. And it's all unconscious. And I hear sometimes they'll be like, well, I had a sister and she was fine. They don't have the same brain. So they recognize that information.
Or the same experiences.
Exactly. But you can see like how, like I always use this example. If you have twins, exact same people, they have the exact same day. And you ask one twin that has all these negative filters in their thalamus, if you ask them, how was your day? They'd be like, It was terrible. I woke up late. I had to speed to get here. I couldn't find a parking spot. I tripped over something, spilled my coffee all over myself. I, ruined my shirt. I went to this meeting and, I was running late for the meeting and I could never get back on track. So that's their version of reality. The positive would say, well, it started out rough. I was running late and, I had to find a parking spot and like kind of hightail it because I was way far away. And then I spilled my coffee, but this really nice guy helped me pick up my coffee and wipe things up. And my friend lent me a sweatshirt because I ruined my shirt. And my coworkers were super nice about the fact that I was totally frazzled and late. So the person with the negative bias doesn't even retain those things. They happened to her, but they don't get stuck. And we have a lot of kids who are on IEPs who have all kinds of negative filters associated with school because they've experienced negativity or judgment or misunderstanding. And so they come into the school and then they, escalate and they have stress reaction. When your stress reaction fires, this part of your brain is not accessible. And then I hear people, teachers and principals trying to reason through, well, what happened? Well, why'd you do this? And it's like, they can't answer that. They don't know. They don't know. So I talk about, instead of behavior plans, doing what's called when then plans. So you say, okay, what was the root fear here? Was it was it a fear being left out, or a fear of not knowing what to do, or a fear that somebody doesn't like you, or what's the underlying fear? So when you feel that fear, what do you do instead of going away? So you give them a replacement behavior. It's kind of like if you and I decided, January, it's New Year's resolutions, like 80% of the people in the country have already chucked it. So say you and I want to get healthy, and I say, okay, we're not going to go to the Mexican restaurant and eat bags of chips and drink margaritas all night. We're going to go to the vegetable restaurant. So the first step is I have to know that the vegetable restaurant is better than the Mexican restaurant for my health. If I said to you, okay, we're not doing this anymore, we're going to get healthier, I'll meet you at the Golden Corral. Like, that doesn't make any sense, right?
Right.
We have so many kids that we tell them, you just need to focus, or you just need to be better, or you just need to not be so impulsive. They don't know where to go. So, first we have to teach them that. And that's that kind of when then plan. And then we have to, it takes energy to build a new habit. And so we have to give them lots of positive reinforcement. So the brain releases dopamine that makes them feel good and gives them a hit of energy to persist. And then, we also have to have the tenacity to forgive ourselves when we make mistakes. You and I will go back to that Mexican place. But here's what I see in schools. You and I are sitting in the Mexican place. We have two choices. One is I can say, well, that was fun, but we got to go back to the vegetable place next time. And the second option is, you know what? We were never meant to be healthy eaters. So I'll just sit here next week, right?
Right.
How many of us do? But we don't give the same grace and space to kids as they're trying to learn new things. And the behavior plans I see are just tattletale plans. We're looking at how many times they parked at the Mexican restaurant versus how many times they went to the vegetable one.
Right. And I'm like thinking about the IEPs, and I can't tell you how many times I see goals of the child will pay attention for 10 minutes. Well,
Yeah,
if the child could pay attention for 10 minutes, you don't think they would? What are we doing? How is this? The child will recognize what distractions are there that cause the distractions and develop a plan of how to not get distracted, or,
Well, and that's where when I look at the goals in an IEP, I'm always like, okay, so the specialized instruction should fill the gap to meet these goals. So if that's your goal, then your specialized instruction should be practice on how to focus. It should be intentional, repetitive practice with a timer, building that brain to make sure that the student's learning the skills they need, or else you're just, stating the obvious. And it was interesting, my son, so I pushed for executive function curriculum for him in middle school, and he was really fine in 8th grade. He could have gone off of the IEP, but they were like, well, why don't we keep him on for one more year because he's transitioning to high school. And I'm glad we did, because then COVID hit. So he had a intervention specialist at high school that was fantastic. But when we exited him, because I was like, he doesn't need anything in college. He's fine. Like, he graduated with like a 3.9. So I was like, he's good. And when we were on the exit call, my husband asked, how many kids do you exit from IEPs each year? And they were like, it almost never happens. And I'm like, I didn't say this, but I said this to my husband. I go, isn't that evidence of failure? Like some kids need to be on an IEP their whole way through school. And that I'm not talking about them, but kids like my son that just needed a little infusion of self-awareness and some executive functioning skill development, he's fine. He doesn't need an IEP. And now we're paying a person to chart and monitor and, all of the stuff that goes along with an IEP. And so I think if we can teach schools the brain science and we can align the goals and the specialized instruction and involve the parent in that as a partner, and, then I think we have a recipe for success. But the current way it's being done is just very labor intensive and not very impactful.
Right. Well, it's also forcing all kids to learn in this way.
Yes.
Which kills me because none of us were learned the same way. No. And I know for me, most people that know my story, I was brought up thinking I wasn't smart because I couldn't spell, my grammar wasn't great, and I wasn't good at math. And so since we're all being graded on this way, I'm not smart because I can't do all that stuff.
Yeah. And now you're a lawyer.
Right. Well, and it's a second career for me because I didn't think I was smart enough to go to law school originally.
Yeah. So, well, and those are those filters in your brain. And so, for a long time, I would imagine that when you faced something that was difficult, that voice in your brain was like, you felt defeated. So you stressed out about it, and it made it harder to do the learning. And that's one of the things that I talk about in NeuroWell a lot is like the solution to pollution is dilution. So if you have lots of negative filters, and I review a whole bunch of contextual reasons those filters exist from, media, social media, parenting strategies, the medical, and all different things that are impacting those filters in our brain collectively as a society. But, once you understand that and you understand first self-awareness, what are the filters I have and are they reasonable or not? And then by that self-awareness, then you can start to push more traffic down from that 20% into your limbic brain. So like for me, I shared I hate being late. I have proactively designed my life so that I am always 15 minutes early if I have to go to a school or something like that, because I don't want to be late. And it's not good for me physically if I am late, because then I start to get ramped up. Likewise, if people are coming and they're running late or my husband's running late or something, I don't let it ruin my night. I don't let it get me dysregulated where I'm no longer there. I just am able to self-talk and say, this is not that. So brain, you're not doing a good job of determining what's going on here. And then the more you put positive filters in and you start to talk down from the top to the bottom of your brain, the more you confuse those sensory associations. So if I have, positive time experiences, negative time experiences, then that thalamus, when it does this analysis of what's going on in my environment, will send a report to my security monitor, which is my amygdala. And it'll say, I don't know, maybe we should be stressed, but maybe we shouldn't. I don't know. Send a note upstairs to the CEO and let her decide. And so you're still in control. Where if it's all negative, it sends a message that says, hey, buddy, we're in danger. Hit the button. It hits the button. And then it sends a message up here that says, hey, CEO of the brain, you're not needed right now. So go grab a cup of coffee at Panera or something, and we'll call you once you're safe again. And that's why, like, if you get in a huge fight and then you calm down and you're like, why did I say that? You didn't. Yeah. Your limbic system sent the message, say this, and you did it. So, I work with a lot of kids on sort of those when-then plans on self-awareness and how do we create processes where we get to be the CEO. And I tell them, you think of your brain, when we name the parts, I have them name their data manager, name their security monitor. So for me, it's like Harold and Bob. And then I tell them, your job as the leader of your brain isn't to do all the functions of your brain. It's just like in a big company. Your job is to monitor that they're doing them right and they're doing them effectively in the way that you want as the leader. So you right now have Harold and Bob sending you in a tailspin. So you as the leader get to go down and train them, and you get to tell them that this isn't how you want to run your brain. And then you get to monitor them. And that removes some of that shame that we feel when we're out of control. And it gives them a way to feel they are in control. You're the boss of your brain. And then even with teachers, I'll say, when a kid's like off the handle for the day, you can go up and be like, hey, Bob seems really agitated today. What's going on? And the kid will be like, I know. They know they feel uncomfortable and they don't
Yeah,
like it. But now you're not saying, what's wrong with you? You're saying, hey,
right,
Bob seems excitable. How can I help?
right. Yeah, and it's getting to, the issues. And I mean, I'm thinking like on the teacher brain, like, oh my God, how do I have time for all of this stuff? But like, my also thought is if you work this into your daily lesson plans,
Yes.
you won't have to make more time because this is something like, and if you do self-talk of like, you know what, class, I just want to let you know I'm having a bad day today.
Yeah.
I woke up late and I'm not in a good place. So if I yell at you, I apologize in advance, kind
Right.
of like putting it out there.
Right. I need some grace and space. One thing I do with schools is called fizzy or flat. And again, to your point about we don't have time for one more thing, I would argue you don't have time not to do this because
Yeah,
you're wasting a lot of time fighting kids. The other thing I would say is that it's not one more thing to do. It's a pair of glasses that are NeuroWell glasses that understand how behavior is, this biology and context. And when you have these glasses on and you're informed, you look at your class and you go, oh, they need this. And it just
yeah,
becomes natural. Or you say, I've been doing this for 20 years and now I know why it's not working anymore. And so it gives you wisdom that you can use. So it's not like a step by step, you have to have a curriculum and you have to do
yeah,
assessments. It's truly a lens that you're a more informed, educated educator when you understand the brain. And so I do a thing with them called fizzy or flat, and kids love this. You take them out in the yard with a can of pop and
yeah,
shake the can and then let it blow. And you just say to them, hey, we're all carbonated, every one of us, but I can't see inside your can. So if you've been kicked down the road and you're shaken by the time you get to my classroom door, you need to let me know and just say fizzy. And I'm going to give you some grace and space to calm your body down and then join class when you're ready. And then you can keep some data. If kids are coming in every day, fizzy or flat, I say flat pop tastes gross too. You don't want to be flat. So if they're just disengaged, tired, whatever. So it gives them agency to ask for what they need. And then you can give them some grace and space so that they can calm that body down. And then you can set thresholds. Like if it's happening 3 times a week and the kid's not regulating, then maybe you have a counselor meeting or you have a parent meeting or something like that. But the fizzy or flat's so easy. So again, it's not one more thing. Like every single teacher can do that in 2 minutes or 1
right,
minute. And then they don't have to do anything other than if one kid's saying he's fizzy all the time, what are we going to do about that?
right. No, that makes sense. I mean, and it's like little things to, you know, I know, like, I think back to my teaching days and stuff, and it's like, we're so like, we got to get through the curriculum, we got to get through the lesson plans, we got to, and like, no, we need to teach little humans
Yeah.
how to be humans. I say all the time, everybody has heard with my kids, I don't care about their grades.
Yeah.
Are they well adjusted? Are they learning? Are
That's what
they,
most parents are worried about these days. The
yeah,
grades matter, but they're worried about their kids. They're worried
yeah,
about their state and their mental state. So yeah. But I
yeah,
think the minute we align student test scores with teacher quality, there was a
ugh,
massive shift that we stopped teaching kids and we started teaching content.
yep,
And I think that it
yep,
has polluted the school system, especially for neurodivergent kids or kids with special needs
mhm,
that don't fit into that curriculum. And,
right.
and and
Well,
I actually did this for the state of Ohio, and this is kind of insane. Educators still struggle to delineate standards, curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And
mhm,
so, like, when I'm talking to teachers, I'm like, okay, yes, you have this curriculum, it is a tool. And so you have, the goal is the standards, the skills that they need, the content they
right,
need. This is a tool. You, as the teacher, are the expert in the pedagogy or teaching strategies. So if you are looking at the curriculum and it's not resonating with your class, don't use it. Pull
right.
pieces of it and teach it differently. Use it as a resource. But we get so stuck in this page 17 to page 18 to page 19,
But
and kids are
yeah,
bored.
I would say, but that's how teachers are told they have to do it by the
Yep.
principals and
Yep.
administration and all the other stuff.
Yep.
And it's just, and I this is why I usually write things down because I had another thought that I was thinking and it just went away. No, but it's just like it's today hasn't moved, like our education system has not moved with where we are today,
Nope.
and it's just makes it so difficult because, like, and that's the other thing. Like, I was remembered the thing, like, all kids, like, what is this straight A stuff, right? Because not all kids are going to be really good at all things,
Right.
just like not
And
all adults
you don't
are going to
need
be
to be. Right.
right. And so it's like this, our mentality, and that's society. And in the district, DMV area, District Maryland, Virginia area, it's even higher of like, you have to get a 4.0, you have to get it, weighted higher and get into the good college and this and that. I'm like, well, but if you want to study art, does it really matter? I mean, obviously you need to learn the basics, but do you need to
Right.
have straight A's? Do you
Right.
need to go to Harvard, or do you need to go to a school like, why am I thinking what is it? The Juilliard,
Yeah.
like an art school.
Right.
Like what's our priorities here? What do our kids need? What do our kids want? How can we make the child a whole
Yeah.
and not, compare against themselves, not against each other?
Yeah. Well, and I think we're in a really, really terrifying, but also exciting time in education because I think our purpose is fuzzy. So when you
Yeah.
look at like originally it was to vote, so you could read to vote. Then it became like the Renaissance man, and then the internet came along and information was democratized. So that wasn't the goal. Then we switched to career pathway work and all this workforce development stuff. And now AI is coming. And what is workforce development? I mean, nobody can tell anybody what this is going to look like when a third grader graduates from high school. And yet we built all these pathways, and yet we didn't ever get rid of the Renaissance man. So we are still fire hosing kids with factoids. But on top of that, we're also expecting them to do this. And now we're expecting them to do even more. And I'm working with a school right now. We created a priority framework. And really the question was, what is the purpose of school and what do kids need in order to be
Mm,
successful in their future? And what they don't need is content. They need
right.
thinking skills. And,
Yep.
I tell my kids, they're 20 and 23, and I tell them all the time, your success is going to depend on you finding the gap. Like,
Yeah.
where is the gap and how do you fill that? And the only way they're going to be ready to do that is if they're creative and analytical and abstract, those thinking skills. And so what do they even, I'm actually at a school right now and that I did a late start professional development, and the high school is working on what is critical thinking. And they've been arguing for 2 hours about what is critical thinking and what is the definition of critical
Oh,
thinking.
yeah.
And so if we don't even know what, these things are, we talk about them all the time, but we don't know what they are. And we're never going to get there if we don't have a definition and a way to measure where we are in the progression of skill.
Right. And it's also, the school system teaches math, science, history, English. Like, we don't function in the world like that,
Mm-mm. Nope.
And so, like, how are we adjusting it to, making this work and letting our kids have that critical thinking and the creativity? It
Right.
makes me absolutely crazy. My daughter comes home, she's in 6th grade now, and she comes home with, oh, we have to do slides, and this is what the slides have to look like, and this is what needs to be on the slides, and this is the information where we can get the information. And I'm like,
Right. And why are you
why?
even creating them? Because you can copy and paste that into Chat GPT and say, make me slides. And it'll,
Exactly.
so,
But it's not even right, but it's not even that. It's like, what, like, where's the learning in that?
right.
Hey, we're learning about Egypt and artifacts. Go research your artifact and present it to the school,
Yeah.
however you
Show me
want
how
to
you
do
know.
it.
Yep. Yep.
Not that you have to make an artifact that needs to be like this, that looks like that. Like,
Yeah.
and then everybody's graded against everybody else. And I know the teacher brain in me is like, well, there has to be consistency because how else are you going to grade kids? Well, if we start moving from the grades to the Common Core standards
Mm-hmm.
of, here are the standards you need to learn.
Right.
Have you learned those standards?
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say. I used to do those kinds of projects and it was show me how you know. And I would have a traditional test if they wanted to take it, but they could do whatever they wanted. But I had a rubric that was clearly, these were the standards that you were supposed to be learning. So I'm like, you can make the prettiest dance or the prettiest piece of art or the prettiest whatever, but if you cannot adequately fulfill these criteria on the rubric, then if I was your art teacher, I'd give you an A, but that's not what we're doing right now. And the kids understood that. So I think if we get away from, a lot of rubrics are just checklist. Do you have 2 images on the slide? Did you put a title
Yes.
slide? And I always tell teachers when they have rubrics that way, I'm like, your whole rubric is answering one question. Did you follow instructions? And the question I have is, what were they learning? Because I see no evidence of learning in here.
Yep.
I just see, did you comply, complete, conform? And
Right.
that's a problem. Yeah.
And for our kids, I have so many clients that the kids go spiraling downward because they get stuck on, I have to make this perfect.
Yep.
And they are not even learning the content because they have to make the slide perfect and they have to make it look like this and they have to make it look like that. And where's the learning in that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, in
You know?
the only class that makes sense that would be like a technology class teaching you how to use technology would make sense to have, you have to do these things on a slide, but as a project, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, and that's going back to what is the purpose of this assignment?
Right.
My daughter had an assignment one time and she had to write whatever, the paper on it. And, it's in 6th grade. And she's like, Mom, I don't get it. I have all the information to do the slides. Why can't I just do slides to show what I know? And I'm like, because the school systems are stupid and they make everybody do the same thing.
Right.
Because what else am I going to say? I don't know why. But that's the thing. What is the purpose of this assignment? If the purpose of the assignment is, can you research and write a project? Okay, a paper. Okay, 100%. Yes, we want to learn how to write a paper.
Right.
But if that's the case, then why are they doing the research themselves? Just give them the research.
Exactly.
Let's just look at one skill. Whereas if the assignment is, can you research and show what you learned? Then, okay, here's what you need to do to research. Now show us what you learned, however you're comfortable doing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think part of it is the way that we've set up the curriculum in such a linear, sequential fashion. And, I was working with a history teacher once and I said, why do we even study history? And so we study it to understand leaders. We study it to understand conflicts. We study it to understand culture. So I was like, okay, so what if the first quarter of the school year, you studied all the major leaders and you could have kids take on the persona of a leader. You could have arguments among the leaders, really get them a deep dive into the leaders and have a timeline. So you could put Genghis Khan before Napoleon, before, put them across. And then the second quarter, talk about all the reasons we fight. What are the precipitating factors to conflict? And you can talk about Helen, you can talk, sometimes it's a woman, sometimes it's property, sometimes it's culture, whatever. And have the kids again explore where has that happened repeatedly, and then tag it up on your timeline and go back to the leaders. And if this leader had been in charge, do you think he would have done that, or is it just that leader? The third quarter, go through how our conflicts resolved, treaties, takeovers, imperialism, whatever, and have them go through again, they're spiraling back through. And then the fourth quarter, talk about culture. So how do you think culture impacted the way these different stories we've talked about for the past 3 matter? Then, and I did this with one history teacher, and then his final, imagine this being your daughter's final. Draw the name of a leader, draw a precipitating factor, draw a resolution, and draw a culture. And you have to write a story of a conflict with this leader in that culture. Now you're really doing some thinking, right? You're having to think of, this is the leader, but that wasn't his culture. So what aspects of him do I want to highlight? But this culture maybe is different. So what would that have influenced him based on his personality? And you're drawing from the whole year. Versus what year was this war and how many battles were there, and So.
Right. My dad always says, why do we learn history? And so history doesn't repeat itself.
Yeah.
But if you're learning it in that narrow way of the China dynasties and this, well, we don't live in China, so how's history going to repeat itself?
Right.
Whereas if you understand the process of what happened, why was there a war? Why did one dynasty act this way? And what can we see of in today's day? Do we see any characteristics of that? Do we see that happening?
Exactly. And I just think across the board, I think that AI is going to force schools into seriously transformative change, or they're going to be obsolete. And we're already seeing like in Texas, there's a school, they go to school for 2 hours a day, and AI teaches all of the 4 core content areas. And the rest of the day, they put on plays, they do science experiments, they do community service, they do all these other things that are about child development, right?
Yeah.
Their data is blowing other schools out of the water.
Yep.
And, and yet we have teachers that are like, I can't get these kids to learn in 8 hours. I need more time. No, you don't.
No,
You don't need more time. You need more alignment between how you teach and how they learn. And they've changed. And that's why we need to change our practices. But, education is just this behemoth that doesn't move. And I think, back to the point about grades, higher education, what's the purpose of that anymore? So they're going to be in a real, pickle to try to figure out what that looks like as well. And, it's funny when you think about grades. I did a study with a suburban school in the Columbus area, and we gathered all the different data points they had. And our research question was, what impacts grade point average? And the results were stunning. Number one, attendance had 0 impact.
Nope.
The administration was not happy about, because we always say, if you just get them here, we'll teach them. And so the question was, what are we doing in school that it doesn't matter if they're there or not? Like, how much are we just doing completion compliance? And the number one, see if you can guess the number one variable that impacted grade point average.
I mean, I want to say like motivation or home life. What's expected of them, right?
Nurse visits.
Nurse visits.
We controlled for diabetes and kids who go down regularly to the nurse. If they went to the nurse twice, there was no impact. If they went a third time, it was by far the largest effect size and the biggest impact, followed by a 504. Why is that? Well, stress hurts. And emotional dysregulation. You just want to go find, and usually the nurse is a kind place where you can just lay down for a minute and escape. And a 504 is often for ADHD or for anxiety or other mental health issues. And the kids are getting no support other than, if you think of it, you can advocate for an accommodation. Well, they're not going to do that. And so we get 504s and nobody's helping those kids to navigate those accommodations. So it was very interesting. We had some very interesting conversations after the findings were analyzed, and talked about some things the school needed to do to think about, interventions. Like, if a kid's at the nurse twice, we need to actually have a conversation with them about, are you okay?
Right. That's so and it's so true, because I'm looking at the attendance, and one of the biggest battles I have with finding eligibility for IEPs, especially with our kids, our 2E kids, and our kids with PDA and all of that other, is that, but they're on grade level or above grade level and getting straight A's, and I'm like, but they're not in school 50% of the time.
Right.
They're not available for learning, and it's been. Like, I've had to teach IEP teams more than once of like, it's not all academic. That's not what educational impact is.
Right.
Like, we need to look at the executive functioning skills, the anxiety, what's going on that this child can't be in school. Because again, we don't need to worry about the academics. We see that, we know that. So now you as a school need to figure out, how can we make this child whole?
Right.
So that they can function.
Right. Well, and I think that, the really big question is, how in the world can a kid who only attends 50% of the time get straight A's? Are you going to make attendance voluntary? Because clearly it's not important. And that's troubling. I mean, that's very troubling.
Right. Because the law is that you have to be going.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do we, that is scary to think of that realistically, is that if they're getting all the knowledge they need without going to school, there's something wrong.
Right.
And how can we fix that?
Well, and I think the other, in addition to internally with the school, I think the other thing in regard to IEPs and students with special needs is the parent partnerships. That, I always say, if you're having a partnership, there's a benefit to being in the partnership, and you have some power in the partnership. So you have voice and you have a purpose for partnering. A lot of times what I see in schools is not, parents don't have the voice or don't know they have a voice, and they don't necessarily gain anything from the partnership. And so why would you be in it? And so we end up with just a subordinate, hey, we're doing everything and you just sign this.
Right.
And the reality is change requires repetition, experience, and emotion. And so if you want to make that change in that brain, the executive function change or whatever, if they're doing it at home as well with positive reinforcements, you're going to close those gaps a lot closer. But if you leave the parent in the dark and then just call them every day to tell them their kid left the classroom, then you're like, thank you, Captain Obvious. What do you want me to do?
Right, exactly. Like, they call all the time about discipline and this and that and the other. I'm like, okay, so what are you doing to keep them from doing that? Because if you're calling me all the time, then what does my kid now learn? Or the suspensions, don't even get me started on that. Because what have you just taught the kid? You don't want to go to school, do this.
Yeah.
You want to be sent home, do that. That's helpful.
Right.
It makes me crazy. I could talk to you forever because I'm like thinking of like all these other topics. Like, oh wait, we didn't talk about that, so I'm gonna have to have you back again. Because just like the what you touched on earlier about the perception, and your reality as the teacher in the school is not the same as your child's perception and the child's perception, and that is such an important factor to think about. Because when a kid comes in and says, "I don't feel safe," and the school says, "You're safe here. What are you talking about?"
Right.
It's totally, yeah.
So I'd love to come back.
Yeah, no, definitely. I want to bring this back for parents, because I'm sure parents are like, okay, great. So she's working with the schools. She's not somebody we can call. Like, is there a way you can link it so for parents to start making the change at their child's IEP meeting? What are some like suggested pointers you have for them?
Well, one thing I would definitely advise parents to do is ask the teachers to prove their theory of change. So what data from the evaluation report drove you to decide on this intervention? And what success have you had with this intervention with other students that are like my child? And I think parents will be amazed that they cannot answer those questions, but it positions the parent not as an angry parent, but as a curious parent. And it underscores the fact that this isn't just going to be a blind signer, And then I think the other piece too is kids are exhausted when they get home from school. So as a parent, like pick your battles and positivity. If you and I are on that kick and we're going to this vegetable restaurant, and first of all, if we lose 20 pounds and not one person says anything about it, then we lose our momentum, right? So your kids are trying and they're trying new things. So ask them what they're proud of during the day. I used to do this with my kids. I'd say, tell me 2 good things that happened today. They couldn't do it. And it was really sad. They'd say things like, well, I don't know, I didn't get in a fight. And I'm like, well, that's not good. That's the absence of bad, right?
Right.
But once they knew I was going to ask them that question every single night at dinner, then the thalamus in their brain said, hey, I got to look for that. I need to pay attention because I'm going to need it. And so you start to notice, like the twins that spill coffee, you notice the guy who helps you up and helps you out. You have those positive biases.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the gratitude list.
Yes, exactly. And actually in NeuroWell, the 4th section of the book is on how to influence change in the home. So parents would benefit by reading the book because they're going to get a lot of information about why kids are struggling, how the brain works, things that you'd want to see in a school, especially there's the behavior plans and all of that is in there so they can come more informed. And then the 4th section is really about what is a positive home. And it talks about the curriculum of the home and the different things that we have to do to support habit change. We need to have value and we need to have expectancy for the change. I expect I'll do well and I value what I'm doing. And then you can influence change with, personal messaging, with social structure, or with structural, how you set things up in your home. And I could talk about that for an hour. So
I know. Like, you're going to reschedule to come back on again, and we'll go to one of these topics. So this has been so awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. This is why, I love having people from all walks of life, because everybody has something different to bring, and it just, as a parent of 2 neurodiverse kids and as a former teacher and an attorney now, it's helpful to look at things differently, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how we can, on a one-on-one basis, individual basis, start making these little changes with our kids. And I love, asking the teachers flat out, well, what made you think this was the right way
What's
to
your
go?
theory of change? How is the specialized instruction going to address those problems?
Yep. And then if it's not, then okay, well then let's think of how we can
Right.
and write it better.
Right. Exactly.
So this has been so awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you all for listening and being here with us today. We hope today's conversations gave you new tools, insights, or just a little more peace of mind as you support your neurodivergent child. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone in your village. Next week, we will have the episode 128, Building Skills That Last with Jennifer Joseph, reading, writing, resumes, and more. You can always learn more and connect with me at schefterlaw.com or follow along on social media. Until next time, remember, you do not have to do it all alone.